Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Erin Beagle, the Executive Director of Roots to Harvest. Welcome, Erin.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Erin, tell me a little bit about yourself. Did you grow up in Thunder Bay?
No, I am not from here. I grew up in a town called Prince George in BC. And Prince George and Thunder Bay are basically like the exact same town, except Prince George doesn't have a lake. But otherwise, like they have the same economy and climate and demographics, so it feels like home. But yeah, I didn't come here until 2006.
Well, and the migration is mostly west, and you turned it around and came east.
Yeah. So and my entire family moved east, actually. There's nobody left in BC anymore of like my close family. My parents moved to PEI and my sister moved. She actually came here first. And so I followed her a number of years later, and then now she lives in Ottawa. So it's just me.
Well, we're really glad that you're here, and because Roots to Harvest has done some real exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Roots to Harvest. When did it get started?
Well, I sort of fell into Roots to Harvest. I was working for a project called Action for Neighborhood Change, which was a United Way project, where Evergreen came out of, actually. So Linda Bruins and the whole Evergreen crowd. That's where I started working when I first came here, and I connected with some of the partners that were doing that, and they had just gotten a grant to do something they were calling Roots to Harvest, and it was with the university, LU. So Dr. Doug West and Dr. Connie Nelson, and two other community members, I think Ellen actually from Eco Superior and Joanne Henderson, helped to write this grant called Roots to Harvest. And I was hired to run that grant back in 2007, I think is when it was. So I started part-time. I was still doing Action for Neighborhood Change part-time and started doing Roots to Harvest part-time. And it was really a different program than what it is now. It was a lot more about like the knowledge around food security or the knowledge around growing food, and less about the community or like the outreach piece that I think we're known for more now. So it evolved over time. But yeah, it's been going since 2007 in some form or another. We didn't incorporate until 2012 when we sort of had like $800 in the bank, and we thought like, what do we do with this? And we had sort of squirreled it away from veggie gardens that we had done, and we thought we could either like donate it to an organization and just like sort of do that, or we could try, like we could see what this looked like and incorporate. And we got our first lawyer bill when we did it, and we were like, no, let's just see if we can do it ourselves. And we did. So there's a woman named Jody, and she and we like went on the web and downloaded bylaws, and anyway, we incorporated, and we wrote a grant to the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and we got our first big grant after we incorporated, and that was like the beginning of what is now Roots to Harvest, about youth and about community and about outreach. Yeah.
Well, I'm an avid gardener. I have a big organic garden.
Nice.
And today I just took in a couple of crates of lettuce to the Dewdrop.
Nice.
And it's about community.
Yeah.
You know, you walk in and people say, "Hey, Steve, how you doing?" And everybody's friendly, and it is about building community and sharing food. And I think it was that big food security grant that Doug West and Connie Nelson were involved with back in the day.
That's right.
That has made such significant change, or began a lot of change.
I mean, there was some good grassroots food security work going on. The Women's Center, the Health Unit, there's Seed Saver Group, the Good Food Box. There was some work, and I think that Food Security Research Network that got a big McConnell grant to start that sort of like took it to this like other level. But the good work, I think, really is at this grassroots level, is based in community. And so I think that the version that we see of Roots to Harvest now like really reflects that piece of like responsiveness to what is needed, what are the gaps, how can we, assist or be involved. And food like continues to be the medium with which we do that, whether it's kitchens or gardens. But it is a connector, like it is the great connector and equalizer in some ways, because we all have some food memories, some food association. Some of them are really negative, some of them are really positive. But I mean, it's funny. I mean, I kind of want to go back now because I feel like it is a great connector, but it also has the power to be a big divider too, because of the inequities that we have in our system. So a lot of the work that Roots to Harvest does now is because of, you know, the systems that are in place to keep people in poverty. And those are the things that we're seeing in the communities that we're working with that are struggling around food, but also just struggling around like housing, or struggling around equality or belonging. And food is the one that brings them in, at least.
So you're talking about community and connecting. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what do you mean community? Like, what does that look like from your perspective in Roots to Harvest?
Yeah, that's interesting. So community for us is where people belong. They have a feeling of belonging. They have a place to belong. They have a way to be of use, to be valued, and something to offer. And so those things are what we continue to try to bring into all of our programs, whether it's employment or schools or our skills building ones, that there is a reason why we're there. There is a sense of like you are welcome in whatever form you are coming in, or whatever your background, or wherever you're, like there's a place for you here, and you deserve as much as the next person, and that there you have something to offer. Like you have a skill to, like, even if school is not your bag and like that is just not happening, or even if you know you've been kicked out of the house or you've just come out of jail, like, but there is like you have something to offer, and like how can we tap into that? And so a lot of the work that we do is around that work on sense of belonging and place and value. And if people can feel that, then they can participate in community. And when we don't feel that, we go to the fringe. We don't belong. We can't be of use. We have nothing to offer. We don't feel valued. So we go to the fringes. And I do think a lot of our work is to just like reach out to those fringes and make a few inroads. And I don't want to make everybody mainstream. Like that's not really interesting to me, or like, you know, to make them all feel like, oh, now I'm normal, or now I'm part of the, you know, but to be okay to be on the fringe, but to like still know that you're valued and belong and have use. So yeah, that's what it is to me, I think.
Well, it's so interesting. The New Direction Speaker School that I'm involved with, we worked together with Roots to Harvest last summer.
Yeah, we really value that program.
Our little project at Shelter House.
Yeah.
And when we did the evaluation, and I had a guest on who did the evaluation last month, that the participants, the folks that access Shelter House and the services, talked about the importance of gardening for them. That they felt normal, not in the mainstream, but like other people.
This is what people do.
And that they could see the value of what they were doing, and there's a payoff.
Yeah.
You know, you plant a plant, you can watch it grow, and you can enjoy that, and then you can eat it, and you can share it with others.
Yeah.
Those are all pieces that help them feel part of community.
And because there's a meaning to doing that, there's a reason and there's an outcome. Like, it's not just a make work project. There is something that happens and comes from that. And so it does feel good. It's really tangible, like to get those sort of outcomes. And if we can look at that as the value of that scale of gardening, you know, that scale at that smaller level where people are just growing a bit of food, rather than like that's going to solve all their food security issues. It's not, and we can recognize that, but it is an in to being able to participate in how community functions and works together to do those things.
Erin, we're going to take a short break. Please stay with us, and we'll be right back to find out more about food and community. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Erin Beagle, the Executive Director of Roots to Harvest. So Erin, we were talking about community, and in a way, food and gardening is kind of like a base that anyone potentially can participate in and begin to feel that sense of community. In a way, that's what I was hearing. And you'd mentioned earlier, you said, well, you want people to be involved, but not necessarily mainstream. And in a way, I kind of go, you may be going against the grain a little bit. Our society is so much structured, and we've got a hierarchy, and we all want to know where we are in the hierarchy and how we belong. But on the other hand, it's led to high rates of poor mental health, that people oftentimes don't feel like they belong or don't feel grounded. how do you see that working with Roots to Harvest and
Yeah, that's interesting. So, so we work with a lot of kids. So we work with like all ages now. Our main work is youth focused. We work with high school aged kids. We work with a lot of people who are in adult education, and so that takes us into a whole other range. But a lot of the people that we work with have found themselves, for one reason or another, somewhere on the fringe, and we would say like marginalized for whatever reason. And often those are products of like systems of society that are just sort of like not working for everybody. And school, as much as like I really honor and love our public school system, and we work really closely with the schools, and they're very good about being open doors. But it's just like it's very hard to capture everybody at a school that's doing one thing.
I mean, how do you do 28 kids at once?
Yeah, you can't
I struggle with 3 grandkids at once.
Right, exactly. So, there's just not enough humans in classrooms to be able to address all the things. So we have, there's one story about a guy, and we often ask, we do these bios, the kids do bios. So if you go to our website, you can read about the bios of the different kids we work with, and they write them themselves as all in their own words. And the one there's a million stick out, to be honest, but just in this context, he describes himself as the ghost at the back of the room that doesn't want to be seen. And that's how he has survived school. It's just like, don't stand out, don't look at me, I'm not going to do anything exceptional, I'm not going to make my voice, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to show up because I have to, but I don't want you to see it. And when you get to know that individual, like there is so many layers to him, that he is like funny and witty and smart and very smart. And for all the different reasons, he's decided that like this is not a place where he's comfortable. And I don't think that he needs to be, the class valedictorian. That's not where he needs to go to like feel like he's of value and of use. I think it's just that like we're listening and we're here. And I think what we're really good, and I have a staff member that's very good at describing it, but one thing that we're really good at is just like seeing kids. We're good at seeing them. Even if maybe they're trying not to be seen, we're good at seeing them for like a strength that they bring, or a way that they stand out, or there's like exceptional in like a really lovely way, but not in a way that just draws attention to them, because that's so uncomfortable for some people. They don't want the attention, or they're not used to that. But many of us have things that we really hope that people will notice. We just don't know how to like tell the world that. So I think that we're good at that work, is creating spaces. And when I mean spaces, I mean in our kitchens, in our gardens, in the classrooms we work in creating spaces where people can try on showing up. Like, what does that look like to show up? What does that feel like to show up in this moment? And see where that goes. So
show up, meaning that not only appear at 9 o'clock in the morning when you're supposed to, but actually participate in an activity.
Yeah, I mean show up. So we talk a lot about switches. So like if you take a school setting or an institutional setting, you walk in the door and often the switch just goes off. Like, I'm here because I have to be here, but I could put dolphins jumping over a rainbow, with mermaids splashing at the bottom of a pool, and just like it would not ignite anything, because it's happening in the school or wherever that place that's not maybe super positive for them. And they walk out of the building and the switch goes back on, because this is what they're interested in, other things, their friends or their social lives or whatever that is. So when I mean show up, I mean we want to find ways that we can like turn that switch on in really genuine and true ways in those spaces, in those classrooms or in the garden or at work, where they might not expect that to happen. And it's not like the horse and pony show. It's not, we're not trying to be, loud and obnoxious and crazy. It really is just being engaging and having meaningful, relevant, productive work to do. I think that's our approach to it, at least. And there are lots of different levels of that. I hire some people who are, really loud and outgoing. I hire introverts. I hire people who have lots of different lived experience. And so, that is what they bring to working with the people we work with, which is really lovely, because it's somebody that they can connect with, no matter what they're doing with us. So you talked about, mental health affecting a lot of the population now. And mental health, there's so much anxiety. There's so much anxiety to keep up, to participate, like social media is a huge piece of that, and to access things. And And we don't have those systems in place yet to really address the mental health crisis that is happening, for our young people or for our people who are in poverty. And we need more of that. Like, people will say there's so many different streams, and there are, but it's really hard to navigate. And so, like, we need more navigators to like help get that out there.
There seems to be such a big gap in a way, oftentimes between the people that are administering the systems and the people that are receiving that support. We see it definitely with folks in poverty. There seems to be a big lack of understanding of each other's world, which makes it really difficult to communicate and build trust. And trust is such a big part in risking anything in a way, to sharing something for myself. So how do you build that trust? How does that work?
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think if we knew the answer to that question, it's like that's $1 million question. Like, that would fix everything and that would be amazing. I think that we build good relations. Like, we have good relationship. We have a sympathy and an understanding for one another and a generosity of spirit to just be open to like who people are and who's showing up there at that moment. So having good relationships, I think it's like a number one thing in doing good work. Because if you have good relationship, then you can get on to some of those other things. You can start talking about next steps in mental health care, or just like self-care in general, or on how to fix broken systems. Like, we can get there. We can address things where we might not meet in the middle, but if we have a good relationship, we can start to understand where we're each coming from. And there's not always time for that. Like, I get it. We're not always going to know when or how to do that. But I think that if we can approach things like that, then that would be great. And we don't see that in our politicians. We don't see that a lot in the systems around us. They're not keeping good relations themselves. But you can also see other examples where that does work and is really lovely. So, yeah.
There's so many things going around my mind around relationships and around humanity.
Yeah.
And how with I work a lot with injured workers, and oftentimes when I hear people's stories, the first thing I do is say, I'm sorry, this happened. And some people have said, that's the first time anyone has said, I'm sorry. Our world is dominated oftentimes by liabilities. If I say I'm sorry now, I've done something wrong and I could be held responsible. But we're going to come back to that in just a minute. Please stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Erin Beagle, the Executive Director of Roots to Harvest. So Erin, Roots to Harvest has been going for, sounds like about 12 years, something like that.
Something like that.
Now, it's really changed since it started 12 years ago, and you've got some partnerships or work you're doing with communities outside of Thunder Bay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we work with the Indigenous Food Circle here in Thunder Bay, and they're working in partnership with the Thunder Bay Area Food Strategy. And a partnership was started where with the Health Unit and the Indigenous Food Circle, they brought in 14 road access northern communities.
Let me just stop you a second.
Please.
What is the Indigenous Food Circle?
The Indigenous Food Circle that's a good question. What's the best way to describe them? The Indigenous Food Circle is looking at food through a food sovereignty Indigenous lens with allies and like Indigenous organizations, individuals, and aligned organizations. So Roots to Harvest would be one of those. Shelter House would be one of those. Who are working together to like look at it through this food lens that is through culture. And if we look at our food systems in Thunder Bay and in the north, it's a whole different puzzle than in other places in the country. And so we, considering, access to land and rights on land and rights to food and wild foods and how we have those conversations is really what the Indigenous Food Circle is looking at. So they brought together 14 road access northern communities to talk about what are the ways that those communities would like to build food capacity within their communities. And then we were brought on to help do some of that work. So a lot of them are planning community gardens in some form or another. So we go into the communities and work with those champions to do the project that they would like to do, and just help implement it and just do some of the troubleshooting about like, how do you start a garden, or how big would it be, or how would you invite people to be in here, and how do you program around it, and how do you care for it? Like just those sort of basics, because it can be really intimidating to start that, and we don't want that to be the thing that stops that kind of work. And the other great thing about that work is that they're connected in other ways too, so they can get back together and talk about here's what worked in ours, and here's what didn't work, and here's what we tried about that, and so they can share that information and start to begin to have communication and streams of information that is northern based, rather than trying to bring it all from Toronto or Montreal or the States or wherever. It's like looking at solutions with a northern and Indigenous like lens to how we approach food or food security.
And so how long has that been going on with
For us, it's about a year and a half. The Indigenous Food Circle has been going on a little bit longer than that. But it's exciting for us because the circles that we move in, like our colleagues around Canada, they talk about food security in a way of like knowing and enjoying like fruits and vegetables and how to cut things and how much sugar is in things. And I don't mean to belittle that. I think that those things are actually really important too. But I think that looking at non-traditional ways of, or I would reverse that, traditional ways of procuring food or gathering food is a really genuine food security and food knowledge and food literacy skills that we have here and that our youth have here too. So Indigenous or not Indigenous, a lot of the kids have access to people who hunt in their families, who fish. This is part of like what they do in the summer and in the winter, who gather, who process foods, who know what bait to use in the lake at this time of year and what fish that will catch. Like that's good food security.
Can you introduce me to them?
Yeah.
I love fishing, but
They're
I'm not
amazing.
that good at it.
I know. They're amazing. And we don't necessarily look at that as a way of that's like a good food skill. If you can't make a stir fry, then you don't have good food skills. But it's like, but actually you can, clean and service a rifle to be able to go and hunt, and you have your hunter safety course. Like that's actually quite good food skills. So redefining some of those conversations around what is our food picture, and giving a northern lens to that is something that we're really interested in. And we don't want to co-opt that. Like, we are not the knowledge keepers in those circles, but we work really closely with knowledge keepers to be able to bring that information and share that information with young people or with community, which is really lovely. And we feel extremely privileged to be able and trusted to share some of that work and to engage in some of that work, because it's exciting. Like that's actually what gets us really excited right now about food literacy is like stop doing it how how we would do it in Toronto. I always use Toronto as that's the bad thing, but it's not the bad thing.
We all love to hate Toronto, so it works,
I know. I don't mean to give it a bad name. I just mean that Thunder Bay and our area is famous for how do we do it? And I think that having food conversations around that too. And there are a lot of chefs and restaurants who are relooking and reimagining food in our area too. So it's I think food sovereignty is the lens that we have to begin to look at food if we're in Thunder Bay. That is the right thing to do, and we have a lot to learn that way. And then we also need to just look at what is our northern food.
So I mentioned I love gardening. I have a big garden, and I like sharing. And in the summertime, I go to meetings. I'll have food from the garden, that we can share when we eat. And I noticed some of the folks who have grown up in the far north may not take some of the food I've got. And I'm guessing because they've never eaten it before, because it's not available to them in stores, and they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Have you come across that? And how do you introduce those or does it even matter? I mean, I don't even know if it matters.
It's a bigger conversation.
I mean, for me, it's I want to share. And it's
you want everybody to love kale and arugula and kohlrabi, and isn't that amazing? But it's not amazing. It's one of the things that we grow at Roots to Harvest is we talk about comfort vegetables, like carrots, potatoes, beans, peas, onions, cabbage. Those are the foods that they're growing in these northern communities that we're working with, and that they're looking forward to eating. And so, my kids don't want to eat kohlrabi and kale either, unless I put lots of butter and salt on it or something. But it's an acquired taste, and also, I don't think that we have to say, well, because you don't like that, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
It just means that, also berries and wild foods and different meats, and like that's a whole different ballgame. Like I tried, what did I try the other day? I tried elk or something, but it was like not even seasoned, and it was dried, and it was like I had a hard time eating it. It was just like elk is not the right one. I think it was caribou. Anyway, we come from different food backgrounds. We come from different cultures. And the exciting thing is to share that.
Yes.
Whether you like it or you don't like, the food, but we can share it. Like you brought your food to share. That's a lovely gesture, whether they eat it or not. But the offer is there, and in return, food will be offered, or knowledge will be offered or shared.
So we're about out of time.
Yeah.
If people want to find out more about you and Roots to Harvest, how do they do that?
The best way is to check out our website and then sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way. We are on social media. We're always posting on social media. I know not everybody is there, so newsletters are easier. Emailing us is like, sometimes you get a reply and sometimes you don't. It just depends what address you use.
Erin, thank you so much for coming on the show. Sure appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and please stay safe and see you again soon.